Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala Rasulil Kareem. Amma ba'du, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome again to another episode of Siratu Khatam Nabiyin with me, Amjad Muhammad, as your host. If you remember the cliffhanger I left you on last week, or last time, depending on when these are running, was that the fire had been set, the scene had been set. The Tubba, the king of Yemen, had returned from his adventure all the way up to Mecca and then across to Medina, or rather to Medina first and then to Mecca. In both places, he was ill-advised to attack. And then he was advised correctly by the two rabbis not to attack. He then returned with this newfound religion, the Judaism, which he wanted to share with his people. But his people were adamant not to accept it until it was put to test, it was put to a trial. And the trial it was put to was this consumption of fire. So the idol worshippers brought their idols and their sacrifices. And the Tubba, the king, brought his people and the two rabbis. And they sat there and the rabbis placed their sacred texts around their necks. And they waited to see what would happen. And what is expected is the innocent survive and the liars are destroyed. As it so happened, the fire consumed the idols. It consumed those idol worshippers that were there and the objects that they brought with them. But it left the rabbis unscathed. And they walked out safe. As soon as that was seen, then all the people accepted, the Himyarites accepted the new religion, and Judaism was established in Yemen. So we see how Judaism came about and how it was established in the Arabian Peninsula. So, as time went on, there was an actual temple that existed in where these idol worshippers used to exist in Ri'am, and this is where they used to venerate and sacrifice at this particular temple. And again, these two rabbis told Tubba that all it is they're being deceived, because when the people would go there and certain things would happen, then the idol worshippers thought, well, there must be some truth in this, because why is it that when we go there for X or go there for Y, that thing actually happens? And the rabbis informed the king that, look, this is just a trick. This is the way a devil who's residing there is fooling people into accepting false gods. And in reality, he's tricking them. So the way to do it is to force him out and then to destroy him and the temple itself, and such will be the situation. And it so happens, and Ibn Kathir alayhi rahmah mentions in his tafsir that a tradition related to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam goes, which says, do not curse Tubba because he had become a Muslim. And another narration which is also linked to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, in which he says, do not curse As'ad the Himyarite, it is he who first clothed the Kaaba. And we also have that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam spoke about the two rabbis, the Tubba spoke about the two rabbis who told him about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is what Tubba said. So when these rabbis mentioned Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is his response to them. He said, I do testify that Ahmad is a messenger from Allah, and he is free from, guiltless is his soul. If only my life was extended up to his, if only I was alive when he will come, I would have been his helper, a cousin to him. I would have fought his enemies with my sword and cleared all the cares from his heart, from his chest. And these verses, these that I've just narrated to you, were handed down and memorized amongst the Ansar. In fact, Abu Ayyub al-Ansari radiallahu anhu mentions such, the very same fact. It is also mentioned that Ibn Abu ad-Dunya mentions in his book Kitab al-Qubur that a grave was dug up at Sana'a, in which two females were found, and along there was a silver tablet on which was written in gold the following: this is the grave of Lamis and Hubba. These are two daughters of Tubba, who died declaring that there is no God but God alone and without peer, and therefore they died righteously. So you can see here clear indications. You could arguably go even further and say clear proof, which clearly shows that not only did Tubba accept Islam, also did the two daughters. Now, some might say, well, hold on, if the Prophet ﷺ hadn't arrived, how is it they accepted Islam? As I have mentioned in a number of these episodes, and even previously in our the other series that we ran, which was Islam Here and Now, we talked about the concept of Islam coming with Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. And what was Islam? Islam, we've already mentioned, We've also mentioned this in our minorities fiqh, if you remember, about the definition of Muslim and minority. And when we define Muslim, a Muslim is that individual who submits his will to Allah. That's what a Muslim is. Because the actual definition is describing what this person does. Okay? For example, when you look at the word Christian, it doesn't necessarily mean within that word what is it that this person is doing. Or you see the word Jew, it doesn't describe within that word what he's doing. Whereas in Islam or Muslim, the word Muslim itself is defining what this individual is doing, and what this individual is doing is submitting. So this is quite clear. So submission to Allah, to recognize the oneness of Allah, monotheistic faith, is Islam. This was the message which Adam alayhi salatu wasalam brought. This was the message which Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam brought, Idris alayhi salatu wasalam, Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, Ishaq alayhi salatu wasalam, Ismail alayhi salatu wasalam, Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, Yaqub alayhi salatu wasalam, not in any chronological order here. And we could go on. Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam, Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, and Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. They all came from the same source, yani Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through Jibreel alayhi salatu wasalam in most cases. So the source was one and the message was one. And the message was always about submitting to the will of Allah, accepting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the one true God. That was the only message which was coming out. And as a result, because of that, Islam, as we've defined it, came when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the first human, Adam alayhi salatu wasalam, onto the surface of the earth. The obligation for the human to submit their will to Allah's will, to accept only one true God. The Sharia, the legal system, changed from prophet to prophet. So we do see changes. And in many cases, prophets were only sent to one particular group, a number of them, in order to rectify and bring that group back towards the haqq. We saw that very much so within the Jewish community. Because even Isa alayhi salatu wasalam was sent towards the Jewish community. He describes them, or refers to them rather, as Bani Israel. So he's talking to them, bringing them back towards Islam. And this is exactly what Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did as well, was to bring people to Islam. The difference with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that his Sharia was complete, and this Sharia was for everybody. That's the difference. And we've already explained in the earlier episodes, the first few that we came across, in the fadilat, the excellence and the virtues which Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam possesses, which no other Nabi possesses, without any disparaging comments towards the other Anbiya, without any disrespect to the other Anbiya. Because we see that ourselves when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, تِلْكَ رُسُلُ قَدْ فَضَّلْنَا بَعْضُهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ, that these are messengers and some we have given a higher status, we've given them more virtues, we've given them more excellences than others. So that's the understanding that we have, is that Tubba accepted Islam. And when he did, he submitted to the will of Allah, he accepted the one true God, and he practiced the Sharia, which in those days was Judaism of the people. So he stayed there, and later eventually, and obviously he must have passed away, the rule passed on to Hassan ibn Tubban As'ad. He was the brother of Al-Yamama Al-Zarqa, who was crucified at the gate of the city of Joe, and this is why from that day up until now that is called Yamama, because of this individual's name. So this individual, or Tubba's son, Hassan ibn Abi Karib Tubban As'ad, became king, and he wanted to go out with his people of Yemen because he was a kind of a conquering type of chap. And very much so in that day and age, it was always about conquering and submitting the will of others, because it was a very aggressive world. It was always about somebody killing some others, and we give the impression now that we live in a very peaceful world, but we don't. We in the Western world might be living in a very peaceful world. There'd be relatively few wars going on within England, within the US and places like that, within Europe, especially after World War II. But if you look across at the other part of the world, whatever's left of it, even though a very small or a relatively small portion of people living within the Western world compared to Africa and Asia and beyond, you will see there are wars going on continuously. So do we really live in a peaceful world? We don't. We live in a peaceful country, but do we live in a peaceful world? No, we don't. The difference being is prior to Second World War One and in Second World War One, we were also not living in a peaceful country. But after that, obviously, we now live in a peaceful country. So I did say that, you know, in those days there was war rife everywhere. You could arguably say it's the same point now as well. It's the same case here. So he set off to subdue and conquer the Arabs and the Persians. And when he reached somewhere around Iraq area, they didn't want to go any further, and they actually wanted to return back because they'd been away from family and friends for a long time. So they spoke to the brother of Hassan, Amr, who was with him, and said, why do you do this? Why don't you kill your brother Hassan, and then we make you king over us, and then you could take us back, which seemed like a pretty darn good idea. So he said he would, and there was an agreement. So the agreement was set, and that's what they hoped to do. And so what happened is there was a poem that's been mentioned that Dhu Ru'ayn put together, and when this was given to Amr, when he killed his brother Hassan and returned to Yemen, he was deprived of sleep and he suffered from insomnia, because the poem itself mentions insomnia within it. When he asked individuals, what's going on, why is it I can't sleep, he said no one has ever killed his brother or a relatively unjustly without losing his sleep or suffering from insomnia. So therefore he thought, hold on a second here, if I'm not going to get peace, then trust me, those people who ill-advise me, they're not going to get peace either. So he said, I'm going to go about and killing everybody who encouraged me to kill my own brother. So when he came to Dhu Ru'ayn, the one who wrote the poem, he says, I have reason why you can spare me. He went and he told him about the actual document. When he took the verses out and read them, he realized that obviously Dhu Ru'ayn had advised him well. And then when Amr did die, Himyar eventually fell into disorder and disarray. So you can see a return back to old ways, because we struggle, and you're seeing this historically again and again and again. The light comes, and then the light slowly fades and fades and fades until the darkness ensues again, until the darkness takes over, and then the darkness is there until the light comes back. And this kind of battle of light and good between humans is always taking place, and it always will. So he ruled there for 27 years. He stayed there quite some time. And we then find this other individual coming onto the scene, which is Lakhni'a Dhu Shanatir. And he was not of royal lineage, so he kind of usurped the power. He took it upon himself to take it. He took out most of the prominent Yemenites, and he abused the country's royal family, and he did what he did. He was a very depraved man, and he had habits very similar to the people of Lut alayhi salatu wasalam in his behavior. And he would do things like this by calling princes, and when he would bring princes, he would dishonor them, he would abuse them, and then he would send them down, so that he would act like in a way disgrace them, and obviously they would never be seen in public again because of the disgrace that they'd been put through, and he would kind of go out and sort of pose about that on his sort of veranda and talk ill of these people. So one day he sent for Dhura Dhun Nuwas ibn Tub'an Asad. This is the brother of Hassan. He was a small boy when Hassan was murdered, so this is another brother, and he'd grown up obviously, and when he came to fetch him, he knew exactly what was happening. You know, he knew why he was being called, that he was going to be also abused, and he was going to be dishonored. So he took a thin metal blade and he placed it in between his foot and his sandal. So when obviously they were alone, Lakhna'i attempted to molest him as he had done to the other princes, but Dhu Nuwas was prepared for him, and when he removed his sandal, took out the blade, and he fought back, and he stabbed and killed him. What he then did was cut off his head and placed it in the window like Lakhna'i used to when it came to sort of showing off that this is what I've done to these people, and he placed it on this window so that people could see. So eventually, when they realized that, thankfully the people were very happy to see that a tyrant had been removed from them, and finally they could carry on living a normal life again, they made this young man into their king. And then the Himyar and the tribes of Yemen united again under him. And he was the last of the kings of Himyar, and he took the name of Yusuf, and he ruled for an extended period. Now, we've seen how Judaism existed within the Arabian Peninsula. Both we seen in later the 3 tribes in Medina. We saw the 2 rabbis advising Tubba, and then Tubba then converting en masse his people in Yemen to accept Judaism. We also see that there was also another people of the book that also resided within the Arabian Peninsula, and that was in Najran. And in Najran we find that there were still some followers of the religion of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, and they were good people of goodness and virtue, and their leader was called Abdullah ibn Thamir. And we know that the people of Najran adopted Christianity because of an influence of a man called Femiyun, who was a Christian from Syria, because Syria, as I mentioned time again, because of its geographical location, many Christians resided around there because of the Holy Land, and also it was a bridge towards Europe. And he was a man whose prayers were regularly answered, and he was accompanied by a man called Salih. And they would spend Sunday in prayer, and then they would work the rest of the week. And Femiyun was a builder, and he was a good man. He generally prayed not to become rich or powerful. He prayed for the sick and the crippled and the disabled. He tried to do good with them, and eventually he was captured by some individuals, and him and Salih were taken as prisoners by some Bedouins, and they were sold in Najran. That's how he ended up coming there. Well, the man who bought Femiyun was astonished to see that when this man used to begin his prayers at night, his house would fill with light. And again, we say that the teachings of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam in their correct form was Islam, like the teachings of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam in its correct form was Islam. And therefore, we don't differentiate between the two. And in the absence of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it was the only religions which existed, and nothing had come to sort of remove them. Remember, Isa alayhi salam didn't bring a new practice. He came to reaffirm what Musa alayhi salam had already said. That's all he came. He came to renew it. He came to refresh it. He came to remind. Whereas when Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam arrives, then he comes to not only just revamp or renew or to remind, he actually comes to rewrite. This is the final testament, this is the final message from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which will affect not only the Bani Israel, it won't affect not only the Jews and the Christians, but it would affect all of mankind, Bedouin, city dweller, Arab, non-Arab, Ahli Kitab, or an idol worshipper, person who resided within the Arabian Peninsula, or somebody who lived outside. Because the people of Najran originally used to worship a tall palm tree, and they would bow before it, and they would kind of worship it. So what Femiyun said to his master, who had bought him now, when he arrived in Najran, this is explaining how Christianity, or rather how Islam, or the teachings of Islam through Isa alayhi salam had reached to the Najran. He said to his master that if I were to make a prayer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala against this tree and destroy it, would you then accept that your religion is false? Obviously, his master couldn't disagree with that. He said yes. So he gathered all his people together, and Femiyun went into his prayer, and he supplicated to Allah to destroy the tree. As so it happens, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends a storm. The tree is torn up from its roots, and it lies flat on the ground. Once the people had seen that, they accepted the religion which Femiyun had brought, which was the teachings of Isa alayhi salam, the teaching of Jesus, and he encouraged them to follow the gospel, and then until obviously another message would come. So this is how Christianity reached into the Arab lands. So we've seen how Judaism had reached to the Arab lands, and now we've seen how Christianity had reached. We also Ibn Ishaq mentions alayhi rahmah that Abdullah ibn Thamir adopts the teachings of Isa, the teaching of Jesus, Isa ibn Maryam alayhi salatu wasalam, at the hands of Femiyun, and Dhu Nuwas is killed, and his companions and so he's killed, and his companions, and they dug the ukhdud, the trench. And what is the trench? What is the ukhdud? Well, I'd love to share it with you what the ukhdud is. And I'd like to also remind you of surah in the Quran, which is Surah Al-Buruj. And you'll see that it's surah number 85, And you see that in Amma Para. And it starts with وَالسَّمَاءِ ذَاتِ الْبُرُوجِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْمَوْعُودِ وَالشَّاهِدِ وَمَشْهُودِ قُتِلَ أَصْحَابُ الْأُخْدُودِ, the Ukhdud that I just mentioned to you now. النَّارِ ذَاتِ الْوَقُودِ إِذْ هُمْ عَلَيْهَا قُعُودٌ وَهُمْ عَلَى مَا يَفْعَلُونَ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ شُهُودٌ وَمَا نَقَمُوا مِنْهُمْ إِلَّا أَن يُؤْمِنُوا بِاللَّهِ الْعَزِيزِ الْحَمِيدِ الَّذِي لَهُ مُلْكُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاللَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ شَهِيدٌ. What was the Ukhdud? What happened at the Ukhdud? What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mention in Surah Al-Buruj about the Ukhdud? For that, you will have to join me again in the next episode, in which I will be able to mention to you about what happened at the Ukhdud. Who were these people? Did they die? Why did they die? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioning it in Surah Al-Buruj. I'll explain those few verses to you as well, and we'll be able to see how and what happened in those particular cases. We'll also be able to then carry on with our story, the biography of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Siratu Khatam Nabiyyin, as to what happened, what took place to these events which are leading up to eventually the arrival, the birth of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The scene is being set. We've already understand the religions which existed prior to the traditional religions, the religions of the scriptural religions. We saw idol worship rampant in Medina and Mecca and even in Yemen, and we're seeing that this Arabian Peninsula was very much so based upon idol worship. But then we started to see chinks of light. We started to see Islam through the rabbis taking place within Yemen. We're starting to see in Najran the teachings of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, the teachings of Isa ibn Maryam, the teachings of Jesus taking hold. So we're seeing that the people are not completely unaware of the people of the book. They're not completely unaware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking to a man. They're not completely unaware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealing texts. So we're starting to see that the people of the Arabian Peninsula are now becoming more aware. The scene is being set. Soon, I'm sure, in our series of Siratu Khatam Nabiyyin, the Prophet ﷺ will arrive on the scene, and we will be able to explore that further. I hope you can join me again in the next episode, where I will be able to explain those few verses I narrated to you, or recited to you rather, from Surah Al-Buruj about these people, Ashab al-Ukhdud, what happened to them, what went on, and we can further journey together in the biography of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.